The morning air in Dublin, Ireland was sharp and unforgiving, cutting through the thin jacket of a young delivery boy named Luis. His fingers were red from the cold as he gripped the rusty handlebars of his bicycle, weaving through wet streets slick with rain. Each turn of the wheel echoed the weight of his life, a life shaped by poverty, sacrifice, and distance from home. Luis was born in Manila, in a crowded neighborhood where tin roofs rattled during storms and dreams were often quieter than hunger. When his father fell ill, Luis left school and followed distant hope to Ireland with a labor contractor's promise of work. Now, at just 17, he delivered food to strangers who barely noticed his face. The tips were small, but every euro mattered. Every night, he sent most of his earnings back to the Philippines, where his mother waited, counting coins and praying. As Luis pedaled past the river Liffey, memories flooded his mind. His mother's voice, the smell of rice cooking over a single burner, the sound of neighbors singing during blackouts. Without realizing it, he began to hum Lupang Hinirang, the Philippine National Anthem. The melody warmed him more than the cold ever could. It reminded him who he was, even when the world treated him like he was invisible. He stopped briefly under a bridge to catch his breath. Nearby, a torn poster flapped in the wind. Ireland's Got Talent, auditions today. Luis stared at it, heart pounding. Singing had always been his secret escape, something he did quietly so no one would hear. But standing there, shivering and tired, a small spark ignited inside him. For the first time since leaving Manila, Luis allowed himself to dream, not of money, but of being heard. The backstage hallway of Ireland's Got Talent buzzed with nervous energy. Bright lights reflected off polished floors, and voices echoed from every corner, some laughing confidently, others whispering prayers. In the middle of it all stood Luis, quiet and small, clutching his worn delivery helmet as if it were a shield. His shoes were damp from the rain outside, and his faded jacket hung loosely on his thin frame. Around him, contestants adjusted elegant dresses, tuned guitars, and practiced dance steps. Some glanced at Luis with curiosity, others with doubt. He looked out of place. No manager, no family, no expensive costume. Just a poor delivery boy from Manila, far from home, standing on an Irish stage he never imagined he would reach. A young production assistant approached him gently and asked about his background. Luis spoke softly, his accent thick but sincere. He explained how he worked long hours delivering food across Dublin, how his family lived in poverty back in the Philippines, and how singing was the only thing that made him feel close to them. When asked what song he would perform, Luis hesitated, his hands trembling. The Philippine National Anthem, he finally said. The assistant paused, surprised. Another crew member nearby stopped to listen. Singing a national anthem on a talent show was unusual, risky. Luis lowered his head and added, I sing it for my parents, and for my country. I have nothing else. Moments before his name was called, Luis closed his eyes. He remembered standing in school assemblies in Manila, barefoot on concrete floors, singing the same anthem with pride despite having so little. Tears filled his eyes, but he wiped them away quickly. He couldn't afford fear, not now. As the stage manager signaled him forward, Luis took a deep breath. His legs felt weak, his heart heavy, but inside him was a quiet strength built from hardship. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing. When he sang, the world would finally hear his story. The moment Luis stepped onto the stage, the massive theater fell into an uneasy silence. Bright white lights poured down on him, making the judges' table and the audience beyond blur into shadows. He stood alone at center stage, a poor delivery boy from Manila, wearing a simple jacket and worn shoes, his hands shaking slightly as he faced the judges of Ireland's Got Talent. One judge leaned forward, curious. Another raised an eyebrow, unsure of what to expect. Luis swallowed hard. For a brief second, the weight of Ireland, of poverty, of distance from home pressed against his chest. Then he closed his eyes. The first note of Lupang Hinirang escaped his lips, soft, fragile, almost broken. His voice quivered like a candle in the wind. A few audience members shifted in their seats. But then something changed. As Luis reached the second line, memories filled his heart. His mother's tired smile, his father's weak hands, the crowded streets of Manila. His voice grew stronger, richer, carrying years of struggle and silent hope. The anthem echoed across the hall, unfamiliar words wrapped in raw emotion. The judges exchanged glances. One judge's confident smile faded into shock. Another slowly brought a hand to their mouth. The audience, though unable to understand the language, felt the meaning in every note. As Luis reached the final verse, tears streamed down his face, but he didn't stop. His voice soared, proud, fearless, and full of love for a country he left behind but never forgot. The last note hung in the air, trembling, before fading into complete silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the theater exploded. Applause thundered from every direction as the judges rose to their feet, eyes wet with emotion. Luis bowed his head, shaking, unaware that his song had just crossed every border in the room. The applause slowly faded, but the emotion in the room only grew heavier. Luis stood frozen at center stage, his chest rising and falling as he tried to steady his breath. Tears clung to his eyelashes. He didn't know if he should smile, cry, or apologize for breaking down. All he knew was that he had sung his heart out. At the judges' table, something rare was happening. One judge pressed both hands against the desk, visibly shaken. Their eyes were red, tears spilling freely as they struggled to speak. I don't understand the words, the judge finally said, voice cracking, but I felt your pain, your pride, and your love for your country. That was unforgettable. Another judge had already turned away from the cameras, wiping tears with a tissue. When they faced Luis again, their voice trembled. You came here with nothing. No orchestra, no tricks, just your voice and your truth. And that truth broke us. The third judge sat silently, eyes locked on Luis, tears rolling down without shame. The audience noticed. The camera zoomed in. This was no longer just a performance, it was a moment of shared humanity. I've judged thousands of acts, the judge said softly, but rarely have I seen such purity. You reminded us why music exists. Luis covered his mouth, overwhelmed. He tried to speak but no words came out. His shoulders shook as he bowed deeply, a gesture learned from respect and humility. The crowd responded with another wave of applause, louder and longer. One judge stood up fully, voice raised with emotion. You may be poor in money, they said, tears streaming, but you were rich in soul. Tonight, you didn't just sing. You represented millions of unseen workers around the world. Luis wept openly now. For the first time since leaving Manila, he felt seen, heard, and valued, not as a delivery boy, but as a human being. The stage lights shimmered as Luis stood trembling, tears still falling freely down his face. The judge's words echoed in his ears, but his mind was thousands of miles away, in a small, crowded home in Manila, where his parents struggled each day just to survive. He wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his jacket and finally found the courage to speak. I am just a poor delivery boy, Luis said softly, his voice breaking. I came from Manila to Ireland to help my family. Sometimes I sleep hungry, sometimes I feel invisible. The audience fell completely silent. But when I sing my national anthem, I remember who I am. I remember my country. I remember my parents. The judges were crying again. One of them covered their face, unable to hold back the emotion. Another nodded slowly, tears dropping onto the desk. Then, suddenly, a judge stood up and reached for the golden buzzer. The entire theater seemed to hold its breath. This, the judge said through tears, is not just talent. This is courage. This is sacrifice. This is the voice of the forgotten. The button was pressed. Golden confetti rained down from above, covering the stage like falling stars. The audience erupted into cheers, chanting and clapping as Luis collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed. He pressed his hands together in prayer, crying openly, not from sadness, but from relief and hope. As the confetti fell, Luis looked up, smiling through tears. In that moment, the poor delivery boy from Manila was no longer invisible. On an Irish stage, before a world watching, he had turned pain into power, and his song had given him something he had never had before. A future.